In this next and final set of videos, we're going to explore options within the Tool Manager, including how to post, and then also we'll be exploring some options such as setup sheets and tool lists. We're going to start with configuring the display of the Tool Manager. We'll start with a file called MCU3D Post Process, and you'll notice that within the Operations Manager, I can right-click, and at any time I can go down to Display Options. The display option allows you to configure how the Operations Manager is actually displayed. So for example, do you want to list the machine in the operations type? Do you want to list the WCS in the tool plane? So as an example, let's turn off the WCS and we'll click OK. So now you notice in our toolpaths here, the WCS is not listed. And if you missed it, we can right click, go to display options, and we'll turn it back on. And now you see it says WCS setup 1. So for example, if we didn't want the comments here or the tool planes or anything like that, we can turn them all on or off right in here. Another thing we can do is group our operations and make some changes to all of them together. So for example, let's just say that you wanted to change the speed or the feed of all of these. Which might not be realistic here, but just as an example, if you wanted to, you could select all operations, right click, and then choose Edit Selected Operations, Edit Common Parameters. And here's where you could go in and change the feed rate or the spindle speed for all of these operations. A more common example might be if you need to change your top of stock, or let's just say your material that came in is higher than what you programmed. You could make a bulk change and update the retract values or your clearance values to make sure that they are safe for your new sized material. Another thing you could do is change the program number. So as an example, if I right click and I go to Edit Selected Operations, I can choose to change the program number. By default, it's set to 10,000. Let's just make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll see that come out in the post when we post this. The other thing we can do is change the NC name. So as an example, if you look at Toolpath 1, under Toolpath, it lists MCU3D Gas Pedal L7. The same for this one down here. Now let's just say this is no longer indicative of what we want it to be, and we're going to rename them. So I can go in here, select them all, right click, and choose Change NC File Name. And now we'll call this MCU3D Verify Lesson, just as an example of how we can do this. So now they're all going to be called MCU3D Verify Lesson. So let's select all these, and we're going to choose Post. So Post is the option right up here, and most of us know how this works, right? So it grabs all of these toolpaths that are selected and runs them through what we call a post processor. So a simple example I like to use is when you print something on your computer, right? You have a PDF and you see it on your screen, but when you have print, something happens behind the scenes and it takes what you see on the screen, sends it through a printer driver so your specific printer prints it out properly. And what it does for a Hewlett-Packard is different than what it does for a Lexmark printer. Well, same thing here. Mastercam will take the data or the toolpath knowledge that we have, using the post processor, will convert it to the proper programming format for a specific machine. And this post-processing dialog allows us to choose whether we want to generate the NC file and also the NCI file. The NCI file is often used for troubleshooting. For now, we're not going to generate the NC file, but we are going to choose Edit, which will allow us to see the code afterwards, so then we could make any last-minute edits if we choose. So let's click OK. It's going to ask us for the name of the file, and of course it comes up with the name we updated it to, but we could of course change that. And once we post the file, the G-code comes up and gets displayed in the Mastercam Code Expert. So as you can see, the code is listed here, and all the green text up top, these are all comments. So these are all generated by the post, and of course the post can be customized to either add or remove some of this material if you don't find it useful. It's also color-coded for X, Y, and Z values. And as you know, we've made comments on most of our toolpaths we've created. Here's where the comments come out. So this is the first toolpath. It's called OptiRough, and it's tool number 11, and that's the M6 code to generate that tool change. And as you can see, if we scroll this over to the right a little bit, this first toolpath is tool number 11, and it's called Dynamic OptiRough, which is right what we see here. So this is the comment, and this is the toolpath type. We also have a very useful feature down below called Find Extents, and I brought this up earlier. Find Extents right here tells us that we are going to be going into the -z value of 1.25. And this is a good thing to know, because if you know that you were not expecting to go down that deep in Z, this is what we call a red flag that you can check on it to make sure you're not colliding with a fixture or anything. You also have options up top to navigate to the next tool change. So this is the next tool change, which may or may not be the next operation, but it's calling up tool number 10. Then the next one is tool number 9, then tool 12, and so forth. Now we have some other options up here that are not going to be relevant for our current Mastercam session. For example, sinks or multi-streams, those are more for our mill turn environment, and we're not going to be using them here. But you can see under the View tab, we can do such things as tile vertically and tile horizontally. So as an example, if you posted out another version of this G-code with a different name, you can tile them horizontally or vertical and compare them to each other. You can also navigate to the Start page or open up what's called the Machine Explorer or the Properties. And again, the Machine Explorer and the Properties, for the most part, will be utilized more for mill turn environments, because right now it even shows here no machine has been loaded. But this is a full text editor, so if you wanted to go in here and make a change to your spindle speed, you certainly can. And understand that this is outside of the Mastercam programming now. So you could put in values here that would drastically cause an issue with your machine. So only do this if you understand what you're doing and you're confident with the changes. And the last thing to note with Code Expert, if you find yourself in a scenario where your post is generating toolpath motion or output that is undesirable and you'd like to change, well, there's a couple things to consider. One is that some of the motion that's generated comes from your actual parameters of your toolpath. So as an example, this spindle speed is coming directly from the parameters of the spot drill toolpath that we created here. But in other cases, for example, it's outputting an A0 move. Well, that's probably because the machine that we have selected has an A axis to it. So many of the changes that you may want to see in your post would actually not because of the post itself, but because of the program that you've done. But then again, in some cases, it might be a very specific change in the post. And in that case, you would need to edit the post. Now, we do have classes on post editing, but I encourage you to ask your reseller for specifics, as they are well trained in post modifications and can assist you in making any changes to your post. In this next and final lesson, we'll see how we can generate tool lists and setup sheets as a means to communicate our toolpath motion and our program specifically to the machine operator, so they have a better idea of what program they're loading and how to set up the machine to run efficiently.